This is how Europe would look like in the 1920s, had Germany captured Paris in late 1914. So the Schlieffen plan achieved its goal. This could happen had Russia not attacked Galicia and East Prussia, diverting German forces from the Western Front. But also, I want to touch on the gamble of invading the Netherlands as well. According to my community, 75% of you believe that France would surrender if Paris was captured in late 1914 or early 1915. Looking deeper, the people agree that France will not capitulate immediately after Paris is lost. The French government was already planning during the Great War to move its capital to Bordeaux and continue from there. It's fair to say that if Paris is lost, France will try to retake it, and only if they fail, they would eventually surrender. Let me show you what I came up with. Also, I'm starting a new series, so expect more episodes on this timeline. We all know how the Great War, also known as the First World War, went. An Austrian was shot in Bosnia by a Serbian, which is why Russia declared war on Germany, right? Makes sense. Germany had found itself on two fronts, so their goal was to knock France as quickly as possible out of the war, then focus on Russia and win the Great War. Instead of a quick victory on the Western Front, we got trench warfare, which meant that neither side could advance without losing hundreds of thousands of men. This could have all been prevented and Germany could have won the Great War had they captured Paris, which they almost did historically, as they were stopped 30 kilometers from the city. Artillery shots on the front lines could be heard in Paris, so the war was on the French capital's doorstep. The first option for Germany to capture Paris is to go through the Netherlands, which is a high risk and high reward situation. Germany had good relations with the Dutch and preferred to trade with them for the duration of the war. Attacking pretty much your only trading partner is not a smart move, but in the beginning of the war it wasn't known if it would be a war of attrition. Most people thought that this war would end by Christmas, so the mindset was not one of long war, hence why Germany invading the Netherlands is possible. Again, let me remind you that in retrospect, this would be a very bad idea. This path is not so realistic and it doesn't guarantee that Paris would fall, but let me briefly explore it. The advantage of attacking the Netherlands is that Germany can utilize their advanced railroads, so they can transport troops and equipment faster. Considering that their plan relied on speed, it was possible to capture Paris by attacking the Netherlands. On the other hand, of course, if the Netherlands resist more than expected, which is pretty much guaranteed, the Germans will get slowed down even more, which would make their situation even worse. I would say that this is a high risk and high reward scenario. Either Germany captures Paris or they die trying. Had Germany attacked the Netherlands and they were somehow successful against them, they could have won the Great War just 6 months after it had started. This is the most optimistic scenario, but the more likely option is that the Germans lose even faster. The Germans attacking the Netherlands deserve its own video, so I plan to make that a reality in the near future. Subscribe if you want to see that video. Another option for Germany to take Paris is if Austria-Hungary was slightly more competent, or Russia was extra incompetent for the war. The more likely option is for Germany to abandon East Prussia and hold out more defensible positions, which would cut in half their front line with the Russians, requiring fewer soldiers to hold. This means that more soldiers will remain in Western Europe, rather than for them to be transported to the Eastern Front. This is another high-risk, high-reward scenario, where it can go catastrophically for Germany, as Austria-Hungary could lose a lot of land and capitulate, or it can go perfectly for the Central Powers, allowing Germany to capture Paris with their extra soldiers. Either way, it's possible. Since this scenario is also very risky and according to the video's title, I will use the rewarding scenario in which Germany manages to capture Paris. There are countless opportunities for this to happen, and I already mentioned two of the most interesting and plausible ways for this to happen. Obviously, we have some more scenarios in which Belgium is somehow befriended, as they would be promised French lands in Europe and Africa, but this is too unlikely. Belgium was artificially made as a neutral country, prompted by Britain, so them caving to the Germans would cause a war earlier than the July crisis. Still, there are countless possibilities, but I want to choose the one where Germany and Austria-Hungary lose some land to Russia, and they do not send extra soldiers to fortify the region. Instead, Austria focuses on Serbia and Germany focuses on France and Belgium. This I think will make for a more entertaining scenario, but you can use any of the suggested alternatives I gave you for what you think is the most plausible way for Germany to capture Paris. So, the Germans would somehow capture Paris. What is next? Well, we can assume that the French government would have already moved to Bordeaux and continue the war from there, but retaking Paris would be their top priority. The French soldiers would lose a lot of morale from losing their capital, but the war would still drag on. Italy is more likely to remain neutral in this war, but I see Bulgaria and the Ottoman Empire quickly joining the Central Powers. This would result in Serbia to capitulate a lot quicker, and the Eastern Front would stabilize. Other than that, the First World War is still ongoing and is looking almost exactly the same way. Since the French would try to retake Paris, this reminds me of the German plans in 1916. Historically, in 1916, due to trench warfare, the Germans planned to make the British and French attack them, wasting their men and resources. This could give the Germans the numerical supremacy, which they hoped would result in a breakthrough. I bet that Wilhelm II learned this strategy from playing Hearts of Iron 4. So, historically what happened is that Germany tried to take Verdun, starting the Battle of Verdun, lasting almost 10 months. The Germans hoped that if they take Verdun, since it was symbolic for France, the French would try to retake it at all costs, losing hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the process. This almost happened, but Germany never fully took Verdun, but the Battle of the Somme was initiated by France and Britain, with the goal to distract Germany and divert forces from Verdun. 1916 was a very bloody year on the Western Front, but why am I telling you all of this? Well, this is because Germany taking Paris in late 1914 or early 1915 would be very similar to these events I just mentioned. Just like how the French wanted to defend Verdun, they would defend Paris. It wasn't very likely for Germany to capture the city right away, so they would need to besiege it and maybe encircle it. The whole process of taking Paris would be 1 or 2 months, but I oversimplified it. So, when Germany inevitably takes Paris, which is according to the narrative of the video, we can expect France and Britain to do a similar offensive in scale of that of the Battle of the Somme. This exact battle was very large in scale, as for its duration of 4 months it involved more than 3 million soldiers on both sides. This would be the final attempt of France to win the war, their last chance. It is agreed that if France fails to retake Paris, they would have to sue for a separate peace deal. Now, you may say that it's more likely for France to retake Paris for whatever reason, but if this were to happen, then we would merge into the historical scenario, so nothing would really change. Even if what I'm about to say is unrealistic, it creates for a more interesting scenario. If you do believe that if Germany conquered Paris, then the French would simply retake it, then absolutely nothing would change in the grand scheme of the Great War. The peace treaty might be a little harsher on Germany, but that's about it. So, in this alternate timeline, the French would try their final counterattack, but they would fail. This is because the French army in 1914 and 1915 was still using bright blue uniforms, making it very easy for the German artillery to spot and destroy them. Additionally, the most industrialized region of France was the northeast, which is now almost all conquered by the Germans. Of course, the Mediterranean part of France is still very wealthy, but it cannot hope to carry the French to a potential victory. At that point, a war of attrition and trench warfare is likely to benefit the Germans. Wilhelm II has achieved his goal to get rid out of France as a potential enemy, so he can safely divert his forces to the Eastern Front. Seeing how the Central Powers are winning, it's possible for Italy to join the faction only to secure Nice, Savoy, Corsica and Tunisia. This is not too likely, as the Italians prefer to ally with the Entente and gain Austrian lands, but let me tell you my logic behind this decision. Italy can either sit this war out and gain nothing, or they can join the perceived by them winners at the last second and gain a bit of land for free, even if they have a lot of disagreements with them. I think it's smart for Italy to join this conflict on the side of the Central Powers at around mid-1915. Even if I'm wrong, it's not like the Italians are going to do anything. No matter which side they join, they either will sit on the Austrian Alps or they would sit on the French Alps, so nothing too much will change in the grand scheme of the war. Now, you may wonder why wouldn't Germany just conquer all of France, which is something that I don't think the Germans would do even if they were in this position. This is because if Germany were to pursue a strategy to conquer all of France before they go on the Eastern Front, this would for sure decimate the German war effort. Despite the Germans having more people than the French, as the French had around 40 million people, this means that if Germany had a strategy to conquer all of France, they would need to police, garrison and temporarily rule over 40 million people. This doesn't seem too appealing to me and probably to the German High Command if they were in this position. The more likely option is for Germany to take the northeast of France, which was the wealthiest, and cripple the French nation. As a result, France would be eliminated as a threat. At this point, France would either capitulate to Germany or more likely they would keep fighting. But in terms of strength, they would be equal to the Italians, so not a big challenge to Germany. I don't doubt that Britain would send soldiers and reinforcements, but considering that the wealthiest parts of France are conquered, the front lines would just stalemate. Speaking of France in 1915, let me show you these French coins that I have that were used during the Great War. This is 5 centimes from 1916, so this coin was used both during the Battle of the Somme and the Battle of Verdun. There are good odds that this exact coin was carried by a soldier, so there is a possibility that this coin took part in any of these battles. On the other hand, we have 10 centimes from 1917, and this coin was also used during the Great War. There is a lot of history behind both of these coins, and it's cool that I can touch something from a time period I'm talking about. Now, back to the video. So, the Germans greatly weakened France and now would move east, where Russia would be in danger. I think it's fair to say that there is no chance for the Russians, so the Bolshevik Revolution can come a year earlier. The provisional government by Kerensky, the Bolshevik Revolution and the subsequent Russian Civil War are very complicated topics, so for the sake of simplicity I will heavily oversimplify. The Germans would still send Lenin to St. Petersburg, also called Petrograd, and fund his communist cause, hoping for Russia to collapse due to instability. This becomes increasingly possible with bread prices increasing in Russia, and this time the Russians cannot look towards the west for help, so they would be entirely on their own. Unless Nicholas II signs a separate peace treaty with the Central Powers, there is going to be a Russian civil war, most likely being won by the Bolsheviks. For the sake of this video, I want to make something that would make it more interesting. First up, I don't think that Romania would get itself involved in this war, as they only joined in 1916 due to a successful Russian attack into Austria-Hungary. Such a successful Russian attack will never come in this alternate history, so the Romanian neutrality is more than likely guaranteed. Believe it or not, I will make Nicholas II sign a separate peace treaty, as he would lose the Baltics, Poland, Finland and parts of Ukraine. This humiliating peace would be needed and requested by the Russian population. Still, Nicholas II may lose power and we can have a similar event to the February Revolution, which put Alexander Kerensky as the provisional governor of Russia. While this would be claimed as temporarily, we would soon find out that his government would increase its grip in power and blame the Romanovs for Russia's defeat in the war. Going over for Germany, they were actually victorious in this war, which this time would last for about 2 years, instead of 4. This means that the United States of America and the Republic of China never entered the Entente. It's still possible for Portugal and Japan to join the Entente in 1915 or 1916. But the war was already won by Germany, so while it's cool to mention them, these countries will not do anything to change the course of the war. Now let me explore the peace treaty in which the Central Powers were victorious. Starting off with my home country of Bulgaria. They would get their claimed parts of Serbia, which is the whole of Macedonia and Niš province. Greece and Romania never joined this war, as I already mentioned the Romanian case, but the one of Greece is even more interesting. This is because the Greeks historically joined the Great War in the summer of 1917, so by this alternate history the war would already be over. This means that the Greeks took too long to choose a side and didn't participate in the war. Still, I expect Germany to grant them Cyprus and maybe southern Epirus from Albania if this is possible. This would be as a reward for their neutrality. This was apparently a proposal that the Germans made to Greece, as the Greeks would gain land in a case of a Central Powers victory. I expect them and Bulgaria to improve relations, with the Bulgarians stopping their claim on Thessaloniki and Greece stopping on their claim on Western Thrace. Relations between the two countries would normalize and improve thereafter. Speaking of Bulgaria, I think it's possible for them to regain southern Dobruja, if not the entirety of Dobruja. This is because Romania would be awarded what used to be Russian Bessarabia. This I think is a fair trade, with Bulgaria possibly taking slightly more, but I will let them have these gains for the sake of this video. To finish off with the Balkans, Serbia and Montenegro would be screwed, as they would become Austrian Crown states, with Austria taking the coastline of Montenegro, most notably the city of Kotor. As for the Eastern Front, we can expect Germany to dominate all these regions, with the brother of Wilhelm II actually becoming the king of Finland this time. Similar situation is that of Poland, which historically became a kingdom from 1917 to 1918, but a king was never elected. This time we can have another German nobleman become a king of Poland. Ukraine will also become a monarchy, with most likely a Habsburg sitting on the throne. Despite this, Germany would still have a lot of influence in the new nation. Since the Austrian Emperor Franz Joseph I would still die in 1916, we would have Charles I, the Austrian reformer king, come to power and be able to reform Austria-Hungary. Additionally, the country is not at war, so his reforms would be implemented right away, benefiting the region. The Caucasus are very possible to go to the Ottoman Empire, which is sad considering the Armenian situation. The Ottomans would surely get the British possessions in the Arabian Peninsula, but the Suez Canal is a stretch. The British are likely to keep fighting, but try to keep the Suez Canal, hence why it would not be awarded to the Ottoman Empire. As for Western Europe, the Germans will seize Nancy from France and annex Luxembourg. Belgium will be granted some French territory, and the country will cease to be a neutral nation, supported by Britain. Instead, it will be allied with the Germans, with another member of the Hohenzollern House ruling the country. France will lose Nice, Savoy, Corsica and Tunisia to Italy, which would satisfy the Italians greatly. British Malta and Gibraltar are also likely to go to Italy and Spain respectively. Overall, the Western Entente wouldn't lose any important European land, so they are more likely to agree to these peace terms. As for Africa, I see Germany reforming Middle Africa, connecting Cameroon to Namibia and Tanzania. Kenya and Uganda are also likely to become German, as this would allow for Germany to border Italy in Africa, which is Italian Somalia. Finally, in the peace deal, France, Britain and Russia will owe a lot of money to the Central Powers, and these countries will be blamed for starting the war. This would have several implications that I'll mention right now. This to you may look like the War of Kaiserreich in Hearts of Iron 4, but it's actually very different. The world is arguably more interesting than the one in Kaiserreich for several reasons. First up, since the war took only 2 years, there is unlikely to be an alternate economic collapse of Germany, which would mean no Great Depression. The second difference is that France and Britain are unlikely to go communist and for their respective governments to flee to Canada and the French colonies, as it was in Kaiserreich. We can expect the same governments of these countries to wage and initiate the Second World War this time. Another difference is that Italy is not broken up, but it's thriving and a united country, as they decided to join the Central Powers at the last moment after Paris had fallen, securing some easy land. Austria-Hungary can reform during the reign of Charles I, most likely becoming known as the United States of Europe. This is the universe I built, so I want to tell you that I'm starting a new series, which will take part in this universe. I will explore the interwar period, together with its many wars and instability in other countries, but also the culmination of the Second World War. Stay tuned as I will release a new episode every week. Check the video on screen and I wish you the best day possible.